What is up, party people? It's Dan, your basement guitar superstar. Give me just a second here. I'm going to scoot back. Make sure you guys can see me in the guitar. Okay, hopefully you can. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. So those of you that watch the channel know that this is a channel by average guitarists for average guitarists. But I've never really given you background as to how I started playing guitar. I'm not going to go into it too in depth right now, but what I want to do is a series of videos for average guitarists or beginners about things that I wish I would have known when I first started playing umpteen years ago, that if I had known those things, I wouldn't have played on and off again. I would have played consistently from the time I started up until now. Right? So helpful tips to kind of help you progress that actually work, essentially, right? Or stuff that to do when you get stuck in a rut. So the first one of those that I want to talk about is your actual guitar. Now, this guitar right here, this is a Chapman ML3 Modern Abyss. When you're first starting out, you may not be able to afford one of these or drop the cash for it. Now, this particular guitar retails for about $550 plus shipping. I paid a little bit more for it because I had to get it from Europe, because Guitar Center is a dumpster fire and did not have any of these in stock for months and months and months. Kept promising they were going to and never did. So I ended up having to get one from from Anderton's over in the UK. They hooked me up with one, so I appreciate that. So have a guitar that you like, that's comfortable in your hands, feels good to play. A lot of people, when they first start out or they're buying guitars for the kids, they'll buy the cheapest thing possible, which I totally get. If you're gonna do that though, like let's say you go out and buy a Glary, an $89 Strat, get it set up for your kids. Spend the extra money if you're not gonna get them like a $200 guitar, because they will thank you. Cheap guitars tend to have some problems with them as far as playability and issues staying in tune. A lot of times the kid will think it's them and not the guitar, when in fact it's the equipment they're using. So if you can afford to move up in price a little bit, please do. You're going to thank yourself and your kid's going to thank you, because the stats show that if you buy your kids nicer gear up front, they are far more likely to stay with it, because nicer gear is easier to play. So having a decent guitar that is actually playable for you, that you enjoy playing, feels good in your hands, etc., is a big thing. The other big thing that's helped me out, and I'll show you some examples of this, is playing with a metronome, right? So this is a Korg MA30 standard metronome. The nice thing about this is you can set this to any tempo you want. So if you hear that beeping right there, I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. So if you're sitting there playing and you're trying to rush and you've never played before, you know, going through the fretboard doing... Anyway, even I can't do it perfect, but practicing in time to one of these so you get a hang of the timing is going to be a huge help. It's been a huge help for me in my practice regimen. The other thing I wish I'd have known when I first started out is the importance of chords and playing lead. Now, there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of great guitar resources on YouTube and locally that you can look up, but make it a point to try and learn theory, and we will go over some stuff that I have found helpful. I don't have the charts sitting here in front of me. I'm not actually quite sure where they're at right now, but I do have a reference chart that goes all the way down the fretboard, tells you each individual note, fret by fret, string by string. Try and memorize those, or at least where the root, the third, and the fifth are. You can make most bar chords that way. That's been super helpful for me. The other thing that's been helpful for me is dig into anything you possibly can, right? So any resources online. For example, one of my all-time favorite guitarists is Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. Now, fortunately, a lot of how to play like him, his guitar licks, the songs that Led Zeppelin did are very readily available. I went through on Marty Music, specifically Marty Schwartz does a wonderful series of how to play Led Zeppelin songs. So I went through and I just saved all of those, and I'm going through them one by one. What that does is it teaches you different techniques, different ways of playing certain things, phrasings that maybe Jimmy Page did different, or little cheats here and there that you can do to improve as a player. The biggest thing with those, though, at least for me, is to stay disciplined with them. So you're going through, make sure you learn the entire song, not just little licks and riffs here. Because that's one of those things where you tend to stagnate. If you don't know entire songs of one song, if you just know the power chords or bar chords, it's really not that helpful for you, especially if you're going to get to a point where you're going to jam in a band setting or whatever. But the next point after that is make time to practice every day. Now, I know a lot of you that watch this channel, if you're basement hobbyists like me, you don't have a ton of time to do that. Maybe you got young kids or in activities, etc. I make time to play guitar every day, and here's why. I need something to challenge my brain. Music has always been in my blood. I grew up playing drums. My granddad played like 8 different instruments well at a very semi-professional or professional level. I've played guitar on and off since I was 18, and it keeps calling my name. I keep going back to this. There's just something about it that it's good for discipline. It's good for staying on track with things. I usually play late at night after my kids go to bed, even if it's just for half an hour, if you're just sitting there practicing scales. Even if you could just sit there doing that while you're watching TV, that's going to help you out immensely. So making time for the instrument is the big thing. And that ties into my next point. A lot of people, when they start playing guitar, and this is kind of a reflection of society in general, is people don't have the patience to do what it takes. And what I mean by that is we live in such an instant gratification society that people will pick up a guitar, and if they feel like they can't play after 2 or 3 months, then they're like, screw this is too hard, I'm never going to play again. It takes years and years of playing and practicing and working at it to be a good guitar player. Now, some people might be jaded. I go back to Rocksmith and Guitar Hero video games and stuff. Maybe this is a little unfair, but I know guys that are amazing, like the best Guitar Hero players ever that I've seen anyway, that can't play a lick on an actual guitar. And that's sad. I mean, if they would have spent as much time on the instrument as they did on the video game, they'd be virtuoso players. But that's the biggest thing I think that kills people is the lack of patience. Now, I admit that I am not a patient dude. Like, I want everything like that. But with guitar, it's just having the self-discipline to know that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And it shouldn't be a contest. If you're in this just to try and curb stomp everybody, there's always going to be somebody else that's better than you, unless you're like Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton or somebody like that. But those guys have been playing since they were 3 years old. So we'll give them a free pass, right? So those are the biggest things that I can think of that help me out as far as playing goes. And above all, just don't get discouraged with it. Oh, the last thing I want to talk about, there's a lot of great resources here on YouTube. A lot of guitar teachers that teach songs or techniques or, different licks or scales, what have you, deep into theory if you want to get deep into it. So, for instance, my 2 guitar teachers that I take lessons from, Ryan Lent and Brooke Hoover both have channels here. Now, it just so happens that Brooke lives in the same town I am. I'll post a link to their channels in the description if you guys want to know about them. It just so happens that Brooke lives in the same town I do, so I take lessons from him in person. Ryan I go to if I'm stuck on like certain songs, because he's really good at figuring out songs and stuff, whereas Brooke is more like the theory and the basis type stuff that you really need to build that foundation. So finding a teacher outside, and the reason I do that instead of just watching his channel, there's things that a guitar teacher is going to be able to identify that you cannot get from YouTube. So for instance, let's say you're watching like a Marty Schwartz video or Active Melody, right? Another great example of a guy that's just amazing as a teacher, amazing at teaching theory. So you're watching like Active Melody or Marty Schwartz or Ryan Lynn or Brooke Hoover. You're sitting there playing, maybe you're doing something incorrect in your technique, and so you're not able to get it down like you would be if you sat in front of a guitar teacher. I would highly encourage everybody, instead of just trying to learn online, go seek out the tutelage of an actual teacher, because it's going to help you out immensely. There's things that they can identify early on that might be bad habits that you're doing that prevent you from moving from point A to point B down the road. So let's say you want to get good at scales or get good at shredding, right? But your technique is off, so instead of curling your hands up like you should be, you're hitting the sides of the strings like this. You're hitting down here on your fingers instead of up on the tips like you should be, which is something that I struggle with that I didn't know I struggled with until Brooke pointed it out to me, right? But it's stuff like that could potentially prevent you from getting where you want to go as a guitarist, to that a guitar teacher will help you identify. So for me, those have been the biggest key things. We'll dig into some of these more in depth as we go along. Like, for example, I will do some videos about exercises that have helped me out. One in particular that I learned from Lee Fuge. I'm going to ask for his permission to show it on my channel as well. And if he says no, I'm not going to do it. But one I learned from his channel that was particularly helpful for me developing speed and dexterity. And so go check out his channel as well. Really good dude. He's from Wales, where they drive on the wrong side of the road. But anyway, guys, I've rambled on a little bit too long. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, hitting the little bell symbol for me so you know when I have additional content coming out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have fun playing.